So good afternoon and welcome to the November First Friday event. And today we have the great pleasure of our guest being Rachel Ray, who's talking and sharing her experience with the founder and developer of Brighton Beautiful, and then moving on to her exit planning and now her current and second, third, potentially fourth career development. So welcome, Rachel, and also welcome to, we've got quite a few new participants for this event. Rachel's obviously been a very great guest and an interesting draw. Just for the people who haven't been to the events before, we do the First Friday events every month normally, unless it clashes with something else. And we have a guest speaker every month talking about a different theme. So today, as mentioned, our guest speaker is Rachel from the current Chromia Group, and I'm going to pass over to Rachel because we've started slightly late just due to a minor technical issue. So thanks, Rachel, and welcome.
Oh, thank you, Julie. Well, first of all, I would love to say thanks so much to Julie for hosting this and inviting me, because she was my first port of call when I franchised, and she was amazing and very practical, very helpful and collaborative. So maximum respect to Julie. If there's anything you don't know about franchising, she does. And I often, over the years, have picked up the phone and said, what about this or what about that, haven't I? So yeah, thanks, Julie. So, okay, but I'm going to crack on reasonably quickly, because obviously I want to get as much information and value over, and then we're going to have Q&A, I think, at the end. So, yeah, basically, when I was in my 20s, long time ago, Stephen Covey wrote his 7 Habits book. And I think the second habit was begin with the end in mind. So I remember as a young consultant, so I trained as an accountant and then I moved into business consultancy. So in my 20s, we had to, communicate with our business clients that they should be starting with the end in mind. And if we did strategic planning sessions, we very much would focus on the long-term plan and the exit plan. So I listened to my own advice because it was by then drummed into my psyche. So when I started Brighton Beautiful, I already thought, okay, I'm growing a business that one day I will sell, because I had that asset mindset. Brighton Beautiful, some of you will remember, some of you not, but it was, it still is a domestic cleaning franchise organization, started in Altrincham, which was where I lived at the time. And these were the sort of USPs, it's holistic housekeeping, strict security, trusted team. It was very much about ethical employment and eco-friendly, non-toxic products. So I grew that with a fab team, gradually sort of emanating from Altrincham and around the country through franchising, so up and down the country. And then obviously, because I thought with the end in mind, it came to a point where I was like, okay, I think I've done everything I can do. I think I want a new challenge. I think, this is something that could grow more if I sold it. And I felt that the time was right to start thinking about that. So I want to share some of that journey and that process with you, because, it can be really challenging. It can be daunting, but I want you to just think for a moment, what is your end in mind? Somebody asked me, in fact, it was Sue Moore, who became my franchise director. She was initially like in a consultancy role. And she said to me, okay, so what figure would you sell this business for? Like, what's what could someone say to you and you would sell it? So I gave her that 7-figure sum. And that, again, focused my mind on the end result and the process that it would take to develop the business to achieve that figure. So I want you to just privately just think, okay, what would that figure be for me to sell my business? And if I did sell it, what lifestyle would I then want to enjoy? And also, what legacy would you want to leave to the people that buy your business? Again, would you want to retain some of the shares maybe for the long term? What would you be looking to do? So one of the processes that I think psychologically you have to go through when you're thinking about selling your business and you're thinking about your exit strategy, and you might be thinking 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead or more, it doesn't matter, it's better to think about it now, is you need to do this run over by a bus test. So basically, if you were run over by a bus, would your business run without you? You know, would it succeed? Is the team well versed enough? Are the systems in place that it would run without you? But also you have to like disconnect your ego, really, don't you? Because obviously we can end up with a lot of our identity is based on our career and our business and what we're doing. So it can be, a little bit daunting, can't it, to actually think, oh, they might be able to survive without me. What? They would go from strength to strength without me? You have to come to terms with that in your ego. So, big focus, $1 million question. What is your business worth? And I want to try and focus during this presentation really about, how to build the value of your business. And that's why the sooner you have this conversation with yourself and any trusted advisors, the sooner you can get on with building the value of your business and getting everything in place so that when you do eventually exit, the process is a lot less painful than it has to be. And certainly probably less painful than it was for me. I'll share the good, the bad, and the ugly of that later on. So what's your business worth? Well, to me, it's worth a combination of these things. And I'm going to dig down in a bit more detail on each of them. But obviously there's assets, and they can be physical assets or intangible assets, such as your intellectual property. It's also the value of your team and your structure and the know-how and the expertise within your team. It's also, and probably one of the most quantifiable aspects of it, is that recurring revenue stream and, the long-term potential growth of your business. And of course, your goodwill, what's your brand worth, how well it's recognized, and whether it's got a good reputation. So looking at some of those aspects in more detail in a minute, but first of all, the magic figure that everyone talks about when they're selling a business, which is the EBITDA, which is simply earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization. And I think we've got Desiree on here, haven't we? Hi, Desiree, who was my accountant at the sale. I'll tell you a bit more about that when we come to it. But you need your accountant to help you with this lovely and complicated calculation. But just at an overview, what is EBITDA? So it's your actual earnings from the business. So you have to imagine, obviously you're out the picture now, somebody unrelated without all the personal connection has taken over your business. So therefore their earnings will be slightly different than what we feel our earnings are from our business. So first of all, you're looking at your net profit before tax. Obviously, you've got to add on your salary because that's an earning of the business. You also need to add back your benefits in kind. So, whatever posh car you drive and whatever payments you pay for that, you can add those back on. Discretionary expenses, though, there's things that you don't actually need to spend to run your business. So, it might be that you employ a family member that doesn't really probably pull their weight that much. I don't know. You might want to add back their salary. But things like charity donations, for example, things that are not essential to the development of the business, you can add that back on. Interest on loans, obviously this is before your tax, but also the accountant's adjustments for things like depreciation and amortization, you add them back. So when you then look at your EBITDA, your earnings from the business, you tend to go, oh, I don't feel like I'm earning that much, but that is the figure, the baseline figure that is going to be used to value your business. So again, starting with the end in mind and thinking long term is good because you can tidy these things up. And particularly that discretionary expenses, if you're going to put travel sort of, or, nice little benefits through your business, which obviously, we all do to varying degrees, you might want to just clarify those things with your accountant, because instead of minimizing your earnings for tax purposes, you might want to be maximizing them for a few years and making sure they look as good as they can be. So that's what your EBITDA is. So different types of business sales, but I'm going to focus on a share sale, which is when somebody buys the whole of your business, all your assets and liabilities, because they buy all the shares from you, which is what I did with Bright and Beautiful. But you can have situations where you kept on with a retainer for a period of time. You could sell not all your shares, maybe retain 10%. There's things like management buyouts, or you can sell the assets of your business. I don't really know the technicalities of those. I'm going to focus on the sale of your business, the shares of your business, which is what I did. And, you know, there's probably only one time in your life that you get a really good deal on tax, in my experience. And it is, ironically, when you sell your business. So at the moment, as it stands, but again, check with your accountant, because, you know, there's always rumours that this could change. But as it stands, entrepreneurs relief, which apparently is now known as business asset disposal relief, means that you're only taxed at 10% on the sale of your business. So if you think, if you earned 100 grand from your business in a normal year, I mean, you're going to be paying at least 40% tax, aren't you, on that? You know, it ends up between corporation tax, personal tax, whatever, probably 40%. But that same 100 grand, if you'd earned it by selling your business, you'd only pay 10% tax. So I think HMRC are incentivizing people to sell their businesses based on that. But anyway, it's good news if you sell, that potentially you're only taxed 10%. So the next thing to think about is like, who would potentially buy your business? Who might be interested? Because obviously it seems, well, it did to me anyway, like a sort of like ethereal thing, like, okay, who would want to buy this business? How would I find them? What would I do? So I'm going to take you through the journey I went on. So predominantly competitors are potential buyers, because obviously, you know, they might want to double their business size, or they may have admired you from afar and think, I want to learn what you do and make my business better. Or they may think that they know how to do what you do better, so you can come into their business. There's lots of different reasons. Could be someone that wants to consolidate your type of business, or in my case, it's like a franchise stable. So I sold Bright and Beautiful to the Neighbourly Group. They weren't called that then, but they are a group of residential, well, franchises that serve the residential market. But there's a few of those sort of franchise groups around. Could be someone from overseas that wants to get into the UK market. Again, that applied with Neighbourly in the sense they wanted to be in the domestic cleaning market in the UK. But to me, it was important that they had the right flavour and values, because I really, you know, obviously believe very much in franchising, ethical franchising. I wanted an ethical business to carry on with the same values when it came to how they treat their franchisees and their team. And I remember actually back at a BFA event where there was a video presentation from Dina Dwyer Owens, and I remember her talking about in their group, they had this like live rich value system. And I remember resonating with that, looking at their history and thinking, one day when I sell Bright and Beautiful, I want to sell it to the Dwyer Group. And again, to cut a long story short, I will tell you how that happened, because that is who we sold to. So again, the person that's interested, they're going to be looking for synergy, aren't they? There's going to be some maybe economies of scale for them. It may be that their management team or their systems or their marketing, you know, your business would slot in, and they would therefore have cost savings because they could run things under the same umbrella. So again, exactly like Neighbourly Group, Bright and Beautiful, you know, part of their annual conferences in Denver, I think the most recent one was. They've obviously got sort of some common teams, commonality of franchise recruitment and things. So you're looking for someone where there's actually a synergy and there's a good fit. But the second $1 million question is, how can you maximize your business value to achieve the highest value sale? And that's what I want to talk about with you predominantly, because the sooner you think like this, the more time you've got to maximize value. And it's one of the things that I now do with Chromia Group, is just work with some entrepreneurs to grow their business for the long term, with that end view. It might be 10 years away, but it's an end view of maximizing the value. Because having learned this, I guess on the journey of Bright and Beautiful, I was doing this because I did have my business consultancy background. But certainly once I got to the last year and then I was engaged with the buyer, I was like really under pressure, making sure everything was right. So I want to try and prevent some of that pain for you and help you to maximize your business now. So that's because this is the magic number. the multiplier. This determines what your business is worth, because you've got your EBITDA, you've got your earnings, and then there's a multiplier, isn't there? Some of you, I'm sure, are well versed with this, so I don't want to be patronizing, but it helps focus the mind to think, okay, right, these are the two key numbers. So the multiplier, I remember back in the day as a business consultant, we'd be like, oh, 3 is an amazing multiplier. But nowadays, people can end up with really quite high multipliers. So for us, we got 7 times our EBITDA. And then recently I was speaking to a franchisor with quite a small network, and they had been offered or quoted by a broker 10 times their EBITDA. So, there's quite a range, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that increase that multiplier. So obviously you want to increase your EBITDA, but you want to increase the multiplier. Okay, so how would you maximize that multiplier? I'm going to look at each of these things, but basically you want to really increase the value of your assets. You want to maximize your goodwill. You want to ensure your team is in great shape. You want to definitely work on that recurring revenue, and you want to have some nice upward trajectories in terms of your year-on-year growth. So I'm going to go into those. Right. So for example, your physical assets. So, okay, if you've got physical assets, we didn't have lots of property or things like that particularly. We had rented premises, and we had a minimal amount of stock because it was mainly cleaning products and uniforms. But, you may have more of a retail business. You're going to have your physical property. And the thing is, with the actual premises, again, you might own them. So then they're an asset of the business that may go with the sale. Or maybe you've got a lease, and you might just want to make sure that that lease is available for the long term if it's a critical property that drives the value of the business. Or conversely, you may want to make sure you can get out of that lease quite easily because the purchaser may not want to commit to that lease. So it's just good to think, okay, if I'm going to sell the business, what do I do with the physical property? Because for us, Dwyer Group, when they bought Bright and Beautiful, they wanted to move the head office down to their main offices, and save costs. So it was good that they could get out of the lease with only like a month's notice. So it's that type of thing that you could have a look at. Obviously, things like equipment, again, focusing the mind on making sure it's well maintained, it's got a good shelf life, it's lasting well, because these are all things that are going to be valued. The price, the value of your equipment, and how frequently you have to replace things. Same with stock. You don't want lots of write-offs of stock. So just being quite practical when it comes to the physical assets of your business and keeping them in good shape. But obviously in franchising, big value in the intellectual property, the know-how of your business. And again, making this in the best possible shape. Clearly, you need to have trademarks. So again, do your audit of your trademarks and where's everything up to? Is everything okay at the intellectual property office? Has there been any disputes or anything like that? But also the actual know-how of the business. So, what your intranet's like, what your new starter training's like. Again, an indication of this would be things like franchisee retention, gathering feedback from your franchisees. If after every training session, every conference that we ever did at Bright and Beautiful, we would always get feedback, and we would always rate that conference, and we would check that it scored in terms of engagement, value of training, enjoyment, all of those things. So I had all that data to go, look, our franchisees, they really appreciate our training systems. They really like this. And again, obviously, sometimes you're going to get constructive feedback from franchisees. That's fine. You can act on it, you can improve things, so just making sure you're doing your sort of really proactively improving your intellectual property and your know-how, and showing that you're successful in how you are developing and retaining your franchisees. Okay, so goodwill. This is the definition. I thought I'd put it in here for you. The value of a company's name, brand reputation, loyal customers, customer service, and employee engagement. So how can you work on all of these? It's what we do as business owner anyway, isn't it? We're growing our brand. We're protecting our brand. Again, I would, if I could get feedback of anyone, I always would. I do an annual survey of clients. I do annual surveys of the team. And again, that meant that when I then came to put my prospectus together, I had lots of good data, lots of nice graphs, lots of nice percentage satisfaction rates and things like that to show how the team valued the business and how the customers valued the business. And again, employee engagement. So this is where, again, feedback from your team, you might think, well, how, you may not gather it that often, I don't know. But for me, I gathered it a lot and it really helped at this point. And obviously brand reputation, you're going to have like your marketing stats, aren't you? Your click-through rates on things, the brand engagement, whatever that is for you, you can shout about it in your business prospectus. And if you've measured it over the long term, you're going to be ready to demonstrate what amazing goodwill you've got in your business. But team, really, really important part, because as I said earlier, if you do the bus test, if you really do want to sell your business and depart, which I did, and I wanted to depart because I knew I would be unsuitable to be an employee. In fact, I think, there was one afternoon of overlap between like the new boss and me, and it was nice for a couple of hours, but then bye, because, I don't think I'm suited to be an employee. And so I didn't want to have that retainer for a couple of years where you're there helping them develop the business further to get your last sum out of the business. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing at all, because for some people that's great and you want to hand it over. But for me, I thought that would be challenging to work with a new owner, and suddenly I had to just go along with what they said. I'd find that difficult. So I wanted to make myself redundant, and that is really important, because if the purchaser thinks, oh no, too much of it is in the head of that person, too much of it depends on them, they are indispensable, then obviously your business is less attractive to be sold, isn't it? So you really want to develop it over the next few years so it is not dependent on you. You need an obvious successor that can step in your shoes, unless the buyer has an obvious successor, great. And you need a solid organization chart where, again, you can show how long people have been with you. Things like your appraisals are up to date, the career development and things like that. The more you can show that your team are doing well, flourishing, growing, the better. And of course, but, I'm not saying it has to be perfect at all, because that's life, isn't it? And if they're in any way savvy in business, they know that. But you just got to have the indicators that show things are healthy and flourishing, and that you've got a great skill set and experience within your business as well. So that leads us on to this super duper important thing, as I see it, which is the recurring revenue. And we've really got this going for us in the franchising world, because obviously we have 10-year franchise agreements, and, the 5-year break clause is only really, if there's reasons for someone that wanting to leave. So you've got this 10-year contracted revenue, and that's very attractive. But also depending on your business structure. So for us, one of the things, again, start with the end in mind. Right from the beginning, I knew I wanted every single client to be on a standing order. I wasn't so fussed on like the one-off cleans. For me, I wanted this repeat business, this repeat revenue, and this long term. So when I then looked at my lifetime value of a client, we had a lot of data to show that they stayed for quite a number of years, and they paid us every month consistently. So that was good. That's good recurring revenue. So again, if you can measure your client retention over time, how long they stay with you, again, client feedback, and if you can show year-on-year growth. So for us, in that period leading up to our sale, we were growing 40% year on year. So obviously that's a good angle for your graphs, isn't it? And what that does is it says to the purchaser, oh, okay, so potentially, this is going to keep growing in that direction over the forthcoming years. And that is obviously attractive. So be thinking about that, your recurring revenue, and whatever makes that income stream as solid as possible, and as predictable as possible. And that really does build confidence and contributes to a better multiplier. So, okay, I'm going to take you through the actual process of the sale now. the good, the bad, and the ugly, what it's actually like. And then I know we're going to have Q&A and stuff at the end as well. So what's it actually like to sell the business? So as I say, I had it in mind, you know, my exit strategy. I'd seen Dina Dwyer Owens and thought, yes, that's the business I would love to sell. But I guess I think of a business broker as like an estate agent. They're a necessary evil. No disrespect if anyone's on the call. I'm sure you're an amazing business broker. But in my experience, they were more of a necessary evil than, you know, something. I felt like they were this buffer. So if you think about, you know, you're going to sell your house, it's comparable, isn't it? You may think, right, I've got a beautiful house. It's amazing. I've done everything to do it up and it looks great. But obviously, where are you going to find the buyer from? You need an estate agent, don't you? Even with Rightmove, you need somebody because they are the buffer and the communication between you and the potential purchaser of your house. Again, it's debatable how much value they add and how sometimes they may hinder. However, they are there. So you need to find a broker. And I did choose probably one of the most well-known, well-respected ones. But they were okay. Let's just say that they were okay. But what they do is they then have a database of potential buyers, don't they? And they give you what they think might be a reasonable valuation for your business. So the process was, I met with them. I did have to pay a flat fee. I can't remember. I think it's about 10 grand or something up front. And they created like the first cut of a prospectus, like a white label prospectus. And then they started on this journey of looking through their database of potential buyers and sending this white label prospectus out. So then when we had a few bites on that, we would then have face-to-face meetings. So for some reason, it took them about a year to actually contact Dwyer Group, even though I had told them at the first meeting that I thought they were potential purchasers, but there you go. And so we ended up with probably 4 or 5 face-to-face meetings with different ones. Or I think we had maybe about three or 4 face-to-face meetings with potential buyers. But again, Dwyer Group, which are now Neighbourly, they were the ones that I wanted for lots of reasons. So in that face-to-face meeting, once they'd, you know, initially expressed interest in us being white labelled, obviously you're going to have things like your non-disclosure, aren't you? So in fact, hang on a minute, I've got a slide for this. So you've got your white label thing, then you've got your non-disclosure and you've got your face-to-face. And again, when I had that meeting with Dwyer Group, you know, most of us have done discovery sessions, haven't we? So it's quite similar, really. I just thought, right, well, I'm going to take initiative here. And I did this presentation that showed all the wonderful graphs that I've just described and all the reasons why we were such a flourishing business. And that was good. Anyway, they then came back with an offer. And that offer was the 7-figure sum that I'd said a few years earlier to Sumor, which was amazing. I didn't even have to haggle. They came back with that number. And what was interesting with Dwyer Group, they're obviously very sophisticated investors. So they're backed by venture capitalists. You know, they buy up franchise networks. So there was no negotiation anyway, because they have all their metrics and they know exactly what they're prepared to pay for a business. So it was good. For me, it was straightforward. But I guess a broker may end up adding more value, to be fair to them. If there was more negotiation backwards and forwards, you know, that's where you may really begin relying more on your broker. So that is where for me, I would say the challenges began, as in it felt quite high pressure after that, because someone said to me, you've got to let them in your underwear drawer. This isn't my underwear drawer. This is a stock photo of an underwear drawer. I remember thinking, really, what are you on about? But it's because of this. You have to tell them everything. You have to tell them anything you think's bad about your business, anything that's gone wrong, any like franchise disputes you've had, difficult franchisees that have been a pain in the butt, whatever. You need to tell them, and some, because you're going to have to put warranties and indemnities in place. So literally someone gave me this advice and I remember feeling really uncomfortable, thinking what you want about, but this is what it was like. We had this like vault, this shared secure thing, and Dwyer Group, because they're very experienced in this, asked me gazillions of questions right back to 10 years previous, every single contract I'd ever signed, every single conversation I'd ever had, it felt like. So that's what due diligence was like, and it was quite tough. And I found I only had one person on my team that knew about this, which was Sue, my franchise director, because obviously it's something you have to keep confidential. You know, you can't be telling your team, unless it's very close, trusted ones, that you're going to sell your business, and you don't want it to be in the marketplace, etc., because until, again, it's a bit like selling a house, isn't it? Until you've actually exchanged and completed, you know, it's even when you've exchanged, it's not, you know, a done deal, is it? So I had about 6 months of this. It was quite protracted, and it did feel quite pressured, and I had to free myself up to really focus on this. And this is where I found myself in this sort of scenario, looking up a table where there was me, and I had my former accountant, who was a fantastic accountant for like the day-to-day. She was great. But when there was just her and I looking at this big group of Texans who were ready to buy my business, it was like, okay, right, overwhelmed. And that's where I called Desiree from Moco, as it was. I think she's DJ Mitten now. And Des was amazing and always available to answer loads of questions and help me work out what I needed to be providing and when, and how to phrase things. And she had my back, and she was an absolute asset. So thank you, Desiree. I really appreciated it. So then, you know, it was about just providing this information to the buyer, and that's what we did. And step by step, they were happy, and it was like, tick, yes, we're happy with that. We're happy with that. We're happy with that. And then there's more questions. So the team that you need an accountant, as I mentioned, but you also need a solicitor. So when I engaged the broker, as I say, I had to do a flat fee up front of about 10 grand. And then I think it was 3% of the sale value they were going to take as the broker. I think we might have negotiated that down to 2.5%. But you then need to budget your solicitors' fees. They introduced us to Gately's in the centre of Manchester, who were really good solicitor, you know, pretty high powered. And for me, that was necessary, because obviously we're dealing with this big American company that really knew their stuff and really had a lot of questions. So the solicitor is really important. And I would definitely go for someone that's really experienced in a business sale. And I think maybe it was like 1% of the sale the solicitor had. And you also then potentially need to budget things like insurance, you know, like I said, about warranties and indemnities. So, for example, for us, we had quite an antiquated lease on our office premises, just because it's one of those really waffly old leases from like 1960 or something. So for the Americans looking at that, and they'd had their fingers burnt by being tied into some lease before, they wanted a warranty. So they were like retaining something quite a lot, quite a few tens of thousands they were retaining until they were sure that this lease was okay, which it was. I knew it was just waffly. So, you know, there's things like that you negotiate at this point. And that's why what I said earlier about making everything as smooth and as organized and as file every contract, know exactly what you've engaged in, you know, where if you've had a franchise dispute, have it all on record, what went on, how you resolved it, if you've had your solicitor involved, you know, how that would, everything that just shows a really lovely audit trail of how you are so good at solving problems and so good at keeping your business tip top. It helps you at this point. And so we had this secure portal, putting all that information in there. We would have some Zoom meetings and some face-to-face meetings, and gradually, slowly but surely, we went through that due diligence. And the day that the money hit the account was obviously a day to celebrate. You know, yes, I was sitting there in a big room like this, you know, literally waiting. You know, the solicitor had given up. She'd gone back to her office and was just sitting there in the boardroom, myself and Rob, my husband, and just waiting to hear, yes, it's in the account. And it's like it's a bit like your house completing, isn't it? It's not till that moment you can go, it's really happened. And it just took a while to digest that. But like I said right at the beginning, it helps focus the mind to say, okay, well, what do you want to do next? What would selling your business give you? For us, this is the sunset in Hawaii that was part of our world trip that we did with our teenage girls. And but it opened up things for me. Time with family is obviously precious, isn't it? But I also did a master's then. I had time to study it was part-time over about 3 years, invested in my health and fitness, started new businesses. For some people, we might be thinking about retirement. Certainly those few years of being a lot more low-key was really nice. But I was hungry for my next challenge. So that's why I started Chromia Group and got involved with helping other franchise companies. I've got involved in investing in a couple of franchise businesses that I'm starting to help grow. But of course, it's going to be unique to everybody, isn't it? But I would encourage you, think ahead, have that dream. What sort of things would you love to do? And start preparing your business so that when that day comes, you're on the front foot. So that's really pretty much all I've got to tell you. Thanks so much, Julie. So as I say, I'm Chromia Group. I'm helping people grow their businesses. Really just focused on entrepreneurs who particularly want to either scale up or exit or whatever. It's just literally helping them also get a work-life balance as well, because I think I experienced that massive pressure that we can often feel a bit alone at the top of our businesses, and we can end up without much health and well-being and time to focus on the other aspects of our life. So I do enjoy helping entrepreneurs get that balance whilst growing for the long term. So yeah, I guess it's back to you, Julie, for questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel. That was absolutely, it was just really amazing, really interesting, even though from my point of view, I did have some insight into the history and the work that you've done. So yeah, that was brilliant. Simon has his hand up with the initial question. So this is our questions from the Zoom section, where anyone can ask anything they want to Rachel, or ultimately anything they want to know about franchising. So yes, Simon, if you can kick us off.
Can I just say that was brilliant, by the way? That was fantastic. And I've been asking for this type of thing for years and years and years, for somebody who's actually done it and can give you a warts and all appreciation. So thank you very much indeed. Unfortunately, I'm a bit of a pain in the backside. I have a few questions to ask.
We like them, don't worry.
Okay, it's just because this fascinates me. The first thing I wanted to ask you was, why didn't you look at a management buyout? Because you had a very strong number 2 in Sue, and obviously a very strong management team. And historically, in my experience, the management buyout has attracted a premium, if you like, when buying into a franchise. Was there a particular reason why you didn't go down that route?
I think probably 2 reasons. I mean, my team are an amazing team. We're an amazing team, but quite young. And whether I didn't really feel that they were in the position to maybe, for various different life stages they were in, they probably weren't in a position to be like raising the funds to do that. And I felt that even Sue and we felt we'd sort of reached the plateau of everything we knew about franchising for Bright and Beautiful. And we were waiting for Dwyer Group, Neighbourly, whoever, to come with like all these amazing ideas that we didn't have to grow it further. So we felt they were bringing something. And I'm sure they have to some extent, but I always, kept tabs on that and was like, okay, well, I'm not sure whether we were missing anything actually, but at the time we felt that maybe we were, and they would add something. So those 2 reasons really. But if not, I mean, I think management buyout is a great thing. I've got a friend that I'm now in business with for this, one of my new franchise businesses, and he's done that really successfully. And I think if your team are in a position to do that, I think it's fantastic, isn't it? So yeah.
And just another quick question, if I may. It's interesting you didn't have a retainer or an earn out. Okay. And is that because I say this very carefully, because you knew who you were selling to? Was it B, because you were worried that, look, in my experience, it happened to me when I sold my business, everybody in the business thought you were a devil incarnate, basically, and you were going to bugger off with all this money. And I think you haven't talked about that, but how do you manage the expectations of the franchisees that joined you from day one, and almost some of those pioneers that put their trust and faith in investing in Bright and Beautiful? Sometimes that can backfire on you a little bit, can't they? A little bit of resentment comes in. And were you worried about that? Is that why you didn't take the earn out, or was there other reasons?
No. To answer your first question, even before I knew who the buyer was, I didn't want to do that. because of what I mentioned earlier. I just didn't think my temperament, I didn't really want to be working for a corporate business that was going to suddenly, I suppose, I mean, when I trained as an accountant, I trained for a massive American firm. And as a consultant, work for different companies in the corporate world. I was just a bit like, I just don't think I'm going to want to go with that. Temperament wise, I think it would irritate me. So I felt that it should be a clean break for that reason. But also, what was your other question about?
It was about the franchisees, because obviously, I mean, look, I invested in a franchise, and the reason for I invested in it was because of the original founders and owners. But 6 months into operating it, they sold it to a private equity company.
And
no, I totally get. You feel a little bit pissed off at that,
Well, okay. So that gets back to what I said about your business shouldn't depend on you. So I was the face of the business a little bit, like I was there in terms of ethos and values, but I really had a great team, and the day-to-day running and the interaction was with the team, not me. Like, so Sue, Georgia, the team were amazing. So I actually knew it wasn't going to make much difference to the day-to-day. Also, as the franchise network grew, so there was the initial group that I probably knew, much more personally than like the next 40 odd franchises. They wished me well and sent me nice messages and things like that. But for some of them, it didn't really make any difference to them. And actually, as I said, I would have felt bad if I'd chosen some Tom, Dick or Harry that was rubbish. But I knew, Neighbourly Group's amazing. They've got an amazing reputation. They've been in franchising for 30 years or more. They've got some brilliant brands. I knew this was going to help the franchisees. And again, the ethics of their way they would interact with the franchisees and the franchise agreements and stuff, I knew was going to be great. So no, I wasn't worried about that. And I didn't get any, to my knowledge, any nasty comments or backlash or anything, unless the team kept that to themselves. I was oblivious.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mark, you've got a hand up. Mark Scott.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, a couple of, with an observation from my banking hat, ex-banking hat, first of all, is I think when you're very fortunate in terms of the purchase of your business with very deep pockets, but some franchise purchases or business purchases don't have that. So when they're whereas Neighbourly probably have a very nice big cash pile to buy businesses like that, if your purchaser is relying on funding, that can be affected by that multiplier that you mentioned. So yeah, if businesses want it because it fits and they can see it growing in value in their overall business, that's one thing. But if you've got a bank helping to fund the purchaser, just to bear in mind that you're talking about EBITDA multipliers, that banks generally will only go to about 3.5, maybe 4 at a push. So if you're looking for something like 7, 8, 9, 10 that Rachel talked about, you do really need to think that it's got to be someone that's got a nice big cash pile or can demonstrate they've got that money, because otherwise that, having a bank there behind as well, looking for certain things that they want, that might make it an even longer process, in my experience as an ex-banker, and knowing how long those things take. So just a thought for anybody else that's when you're looking at who to purchase.
I mean, I agree with you, because that was my experience as an accountant. As I said, like 1.5, 2, 3 times EBITDA was like great. So yeah, as I say, based on the whole thing about driving your recurring revenue and your growth, I mean, all those factors. And yeah, it is about finding the right buyer, isn't it, that fits with you and is wanted to pay that type of money.
And I think you're right, franchisor businesses do tend to generate a higher multiple because you've got the known income of the franchisees, because they've signed up for X number of years. So, and on average, going back, the longer you've traded, the easier it is to show how long the average franchisee has been there. So you know that actually going forward, it's going to be at least 5 years worth of that level of sales, hopefully, as a standby. The other thing was more from a personal point of view in terms of getting ready for the sale. And I know, so you had Sue, but actually from my own experience, Azura was purchased by the other company that buys up lots of franchise brands. franchise brands. So Azura was bought by those almost 2 years ago to the day, actually. I think it was the 6th of November, 2 years ago, when Franchise Brands bought Azura. But 6 months before that, the founder decided, like you, Rachel, he didn't want to be around if he was to sell the business, but he wasn't sure when I came in that he had a buyer. He thought he had, or took Franchise Brands and talked to him years before, but nothing had really happened. But he wanted me to come in for 2 reasons. He wanted to take more of a back step if nothing happened anyway. And the other element was, I'm used to dealing with people and not necessarily being told what to do, but working with executives on how they want to do things. So I guess you can do that as well in terms of bringing someone with experience in, or in the run up to something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's where Sue Moore was a real great asset for me. She was very experienced franchise director of a number of different brands previously. And she then was, like, as they like to call it in American terms, brand president. She was the ideal fit for that. And that's what she wanted. And, you know, so yeah, that was good. And again, obviously it's great if you've got key team members that can be on this journey and have some incentive to be part of the sale and things like that. That can work really well, can't it? So.
Right. Thank you, Mark. And thanks for your insight from the bank perspective as well. That's really useful. Vicky Whiter.
Yeah. Hi, Rachel. Congratulations, first of all, and thanks for the presentation. Just a quick one. You'd identified your buyer. Was there a reason you just didn't go to them directly?
Yeah, I know. I mean, sometimes I ask myself that. And I guess the reason is what I said about, like the estate agent thing. I'd identified them, but I just didn't feel like I knew enough or was confident enough to just approach them and say, this is, I'm looking, do you want to buy our business? So that is what I mean about a broker, is sort of that buffer that you need to field questions and guide you through the process. And the business I used were okay. They were fine. They just weren't wow, but maybe I'm hard to please. So that's why I didn't do it directly anyway. I didn't really know. However, that's part of why I'm quite passionate about sharing this information now and helping, to be honest, because I'd rather share my experiences and help others be more informed to prepare. And maybe knowing what I know now, I would have made the call and had the dialogue. And maybe just with someone as wonderful as Desiree and a solicitor and, whatever, or a broker on a lesser percentage, could have helped me. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose realistically, Rachel, if you'd gone directly, there'd only be one potential hat in the ring. So at least you had the chance of talking to other people, and then you'd spoken to other people. It's a difficult balance. Helen, over to you.
Thanks. That was really, really good presentation. Thanks, Rachel. It was really helpful as well. You kind of answered my first question, which is about if you did it again, would you use a broker? But the other question is just building on Simon's, was did you consider a franchisee buyout?
I didn't actually, no, because I mean, again, I knew my network, they've all taken out their loan to buy their franchise. Or probably not all alone, but majority would have some sort of finance to buy their franchise. And again, franchisees, they're this hybrid, aren't they? Entrepreneurial, but want to follow a system, which is why they bought into a system. So I think, and again, maybe it depends on maturity, in terms of if they've been a franchisees for a long, long time and they knew everything inside out. But no, I still felt they'd want someone to follow, someone to lead, someone to grow the business. And again, I felt Neighbourly Group were bringing in expertise from what they'd done in America, growing similar brands, what they were doing in the UK. So I didn't think of that. No, I didn't think it was the right strategy.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris, you've got a question as well, sorry, in the chat room. So over to you. Chris Wotton, you're on mute.
Helps if you do that. Thanks again, Rachel, for sharing your story. It's fascinating, and for most of us, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to either buy or sell a business. So there are no rules and regulations around it. You don't know what you don't know. Couple of things that struck me. One was the valuation. You've gone EBITDA. and again, not many people talk about this in the industry, but there is an idea that a franchise brand should sell at a multiplier of recurring revenue, and using that as a measure. Is that something you looked at or had considered in the process?
I guess they looked at all of it, you know. I mean, I just knew about EBITDA, but I did, as I mentioned, I did know that recurring revenue was the driver, really, because again, franchisees, but for us, obviously, our clients are all consumers on, you know, we've got hundreds of clients on this regular standing order. So again, this is where multipliers, getting back to our previous discussion, would vary, wouldn't they? Because if you had a smaller number of big clients that you were depending on, that's higher risk, isn't it? So I looked at our revenue. I knew it was made up of lots of small clients up and down the country, so spread risk, franchisees. So it was a factor, but when it came to actually valuing it, obviously the broker gives you a sort of heads up on the value. They were more conservative. I felt it was worth more, and sure enough, Neighbourly Group proved it, because they offered what I thought, and Neighbourly did run all their numbers, and I think they would have looked at recurring revenue, EBITDA, and they had all sorts of stuff going on to calculate everything.
I'm interested in how these things might have interacted, because you landed in the same place, which is fascinating. But I think for a franchise group to buy another brand, they would see the economies of scale, they would see various other things. So the you know, your overhead, which had an impact on your EBITDA, wasn't as relevant as it would be to you know, another buyer perhaps who wasn't in franchising already.
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? It's like the synergy, the economies of scale, the things they could run. Yeah, definitely. And this is why I guess it is so comparable to selling a house, isn't it? Because you can value a house, but it's only what it's worth to the buyer, isn't it? To the purchaser. You know, so I do think, and, you know, again, you only probably sell houses a couple of times, you know, usually only a few times in a lifetime. So I do think it's comparable to that. And actually, sorry, go on.
Sorry, go on. No, it's right.
I was just going to say, getting back to Helen's question about, you know, the broker, I don't want to do the broker down. I do think you need them, because one thing I'm forgetting is, of course, when you're this, you know, the other stuff, you know, before you've sold your business, everything is cloak and dagger and top secret, because of course you don't want your competitors or your employees or your clients to know. So getting back to that question, why wouldn't I have approached Wire Direct? That was another reason, which I forgot to mention. At that point, everything's white label and secret, isn't it? So you need your broker to do that job. So yeah.
So that leads on to the second part of my question, actually, which was you went through due diligence on your own. It was still embargoed within your own business. When did you tell the team, and kind of how did that go? How did they respond? You know, were they upset that there was not an opportunity for them to buy, you know, as a management buyout, or, you know, just
no, they weren't upset about that, because, as I say, I just don't think that was feasible.
Okay.
I really, you know, I've always had a very good, positive, communicative culture, so it really did sit very uncomfortably with me. I really didn't like it. That was the biggest pressure. But we had to tell them, like, literally on the day it happened. So other than the franchise director, we had to tell everyone on that day. So it was a bit emotional for my closest two, apart from my franchise director. The other three that I'd worked really closely to, you know, I did feel bad, but they know and love me, and they all understood, and they were pleased for me, and we still remain really close friends. So it went okay. So yeah, but it was.
So you'd got the news from the bank, and then you went out of that room with that emotion to tell the team that you.
Well, no, I think funny enough, it was an Easter, so I think we'd actually had the money in like on the Thursday. Then there was like the long weekend, and I think we went in on the Tuesday. So it was still all highly confidential until literally Neighbourly guy was there, I was there, team meeting, break the news. And we had all they had all the press releases and the emails to send to the franchise network, so it could all happen there and then. So yeah, that obviously, it's all high pressure, but it actually was fine. As far as I'm aware, there was no ill will from anybody, unless they hid it very well from me, which case, great. No, it was fine. It was fine.
Right. We've got a couple more questions which we'll take, because we started slightly late, so we will just run over. Sarah Hayworth, new to First Friday, so very welcome. And you have a question for Rachel.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks, Rachel. That was really super. Yeah, I might have missed it, but I got to the point where you said you had 55 franchisees, and I'm just interested in how long from your first franchisee to when you sold, when you got, when you're sitting there on that Thursday, did the whole process take?
From first franchising to selling was 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And Helen, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah, so it was just building on this broker thing, and because I sold a business, it was not a franchise, it was a nursery business about 5 years ago, and I didn't use a broker, and I would just say it is worth considering not using a broker if you're really clear on who, or you've got a couple of clear targets, just because of the amount of money that it saved, and I did end up in a position where two big national chains were competing, which drove the price up, and it was really scary. But it is just like selling a house, you know, you can take that time, you can step away and think about it, but it also speeded the process up. It's really interesting to hear how long that took you, because I think it probably would have taken me the same with the nursery, just because you know there's nobody like you who really wants to kind of get behind it. So I would just say if people are thinking about it, it is worth considering. And I know, I'm sure having done it before, Rachel, you would absolutely be able to nail it. But yeah, it's scary, but it is doable.
Yeah, I think now I would obviously have a lot more confidence to do that. So well done you for doing that yourself and being brave enough to do it without a broker. So yeah, good. That's great.
I just didn't want to give my money to anybody else.
Well, good on you, did it successfully.
Thanks, Helen. Simon, you've got a message, you've got a question in the chat as well.
Yeah, it was just a quick one. I mean, looking at multipliers, you didn't mention technology in the multiplier. Is that going to play more of an important part going forward in valuing businesses, do you think? Sort of technology, AI?
Yeah, I mean, it depends how reliant your business is on technology, isn't it? And obviously anything that's more like proprietary or designed specifically that's part of the intellectual property. For us, we weren't, you know, reliant on anything particularly unusual. Obviously we had webchies, thank you, Azora. You know, we had things like that we used, and we had to demonstrate that our systems were good for running our franchise network and they didn't have to suddenly replace them and stuff. So yeah, that was, you know, we had an intranet, you know, that our training looked good and stuff, but it wasn't anything fancy compared to other businesses.
Yeah, and just when you talked about recurring revenue, are we talking about the money? Because you had a royalty-based system, didn't you? You weren't a fixed fee. There are a lot of domestic businesses are fixed fee. In your opinion, does that have an impact on the valuation, whether it's a fixed fee franchise or a royalty-based franchise?
Well, personally, I believe in royalty-based anyway, because I think it's better for franchising. So when I say recurring revenue, there's the franchise percentage royalty, but for us, it was then the recurring and growing revenue of all these clients around the country on standing order. So it's like a separate layer, isn't it? That was very predictable, and I could see the lifetime value of an individual domestic cleaning client. You know, we're in their house every week. Comprehensive service, standing order. But it reminds me actually, so we had 10% royalty and 2% marketing levy. And I do remember having a bit of a challenging conversation with the buyers when they suddenly realized that some of that 2%, you know, the 2% was spent straight away and it actually should be excluded from the recurring revenue, which then they were going to slightly put the price down because, we need to exclude that. And I was like, well, no, I'm not having that. I didn't want to though. So there was a bit of a negotiation point, a bit of a when that, you know, yeah.
Good for you. And so for you personally, this was a sale of your personal shares in the business. So in terms of the meat and potatoes of the deal, the money landed in your personal account, or did you put it in like an offshore account or
if only I was that sophisticated. No idea on offshores. No, just it literally arrived in our personal account.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So that was interesting to get a phone call from HSBC.
Yeah,
All right.
first time you've heard from them in about
Yes,
10 years.
and I really wasn't too impressed. I was like, so you're phoning me to ask me where I got your, I guess it's money laundering, isn't it? Legislation, but I wasn't too impressed. So you're not phoning me to offer me some any help on where to invest it. No. Anyway, sorry, we don't. Sorry, Julie.
No problem. Mark, you've got your hand up. So final question from Mark Scott, please. Who's on mute?
Sorry, it wasn't a question as such. I was just picking up on Chris's point about recurring income. Again, going back to what I said earlier about banks won't look at that if there's a bank involved in funding. It will be only EBITDA. So that's that's a thing to bear in mind as well if the purchaser is borrowing any money.
Great. Okay. Well, we've had some people leaving. We've got lots of really, really great comments in the chat, Rachel, about how fabulous the session has been. So yeah, once again, thank you very much. And just finally to introduce the next session that we've got, which is our last session before Christmas. And we're literally going from high-level strategy, exit planning, back down to really key operational stuff. Our guest in December is Kevin Ayres, and we're literally looking at the power of video in franchise networks and how to maximise your opportunities in recruitment, maximise your opportunities in service engagement. And I'd just like to say I had a short session with Kevin, probably 15-20 minutes last month or the month before, to look at some ideas and topics. And in the 15-20 minutes that we were on the call, bearing in mind he's ex-IBM, so his technical skills are pretty good, and certainly significantly more than mine. I just learned so much. So really, in terms of looking at planning for new year, recruitment, service, etc., that's going to look at things in a very close, detailed, operational level, which I'm sure will be interesting and very beneficial. And that's it basically. So to thank everyone for attending, and hopefully, and very much again, thanks to Rachel for coming, and see you all hopefully in December.
Mm-hmm.